The whispers began immediately. Lauren turned pale. Alexander, what is this? He didn't answer. He turned to the congregation. This was supposed to be the start of something honest. But it wasn't honest. It was a show. I loved her. I honored her family. I gave her everything. And this is what I got. Lauren lunged forward, grabbing his arm. It was a joke. Baby, I was just joking with my girls. Alexander stepped back. He pulled the marriage certificate from his jacket, tore it in half, and dropped the pieces on the floor. I won't be made a fool in front of God, my family, or myself. Then he walked down the aisle. Lauren Jackson stood at the altar, paralyzed. Her hands shook. Her makeup began to melt beneath the heat of the chandeliers and the heavy silence of hundreds of eyes watching her. No one moved. No one said a word. Her bouquet slipped from her fingers and hit the floor with a soft thud. She turned toward the guests in disbelief, searching for a friendly face, but none offered comfort. Not even her bridesmaids Tola and Bianca, who had laughed with her just hours ago. They slowly stepped back, heads down, moving toward the side aisle like they didn't even know her. Back in her hotel room, still wearing her wedding gown, she sat on the edge of the bed, her makeup streaked with tears. The white satin dress was wrinkled, soiled, and clung awkwardly to her, like a costume she no longer deserved. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Comments flooded her Instagram. You mocked his culture? From boutique girl to disaster. You called his mom backward? You don't deserve him. Shame. She tried to call Bianca, switched off. She texted Tola, no reply. She messaged Femi, blocked. Even her makeup artist deleted every tagged photo from her page. Alexander Drakes was the kind of man most women dreamed of. Calm, driven, soft-spoken, and, above all, kind. At just 32 years old, he had built Drakes Tech, a thriving software company headquartered in Canary Wharf, London. What started in the corner of his small flat after university had now expanded into a firm with 3 branches, one in Shoreditch, another in Manchester, and the third newly opened in Birmingham. Despite the success, Alexander never changed. He hated noise and spotlight. He loved routine. He adored family. Even with his packed schedule and countless business trips, he still made it a point to visit Madame Becky, his mother, every Sunday afternoon in Notting Hill after church. He picked up his niece from school when his sister worked overtime, and he still donated money to the community center that had helped him learn coding as a teen. But there was one thing missing in Alexander's seemingly perfect life: love. And that changed one rainy Friday evening in London. He had flown back from a tech conference in Berlin and headed straight to Oxford Street, where his best friend Femi dragged him into a boutique. You need to upgrade your wardrobe, mate, Femi had teased, thumbing through racks of tailored shirts. That's when Alexander saw her. Lauren Jackson. She was helping another customer, dressed in a simple yellow dress, her warm brown skin glowing beneath the boutique lights. Her smile was the kind that could make even gloomy skies look cheerful. Her voice, when she spoke, was soft, like a comforting song. Her long braids swayed gently as she moved from rack to rack. When it was Alexander's turn to be assisted, she walked over, scanning him with a quick, practiced eye. You strike me as a charcoal gray man, she said, pulling a shirt off the rack. He smiled. Is that your professional opinion? No, she replied, grinning. That's just a woman's intuition. That small exchange turned into a full conversation. He found himself laughing, really laughing, for the first time in a while. They talked about fashion, travel, and life in the city. Before he left, she handed him a neatly folded receipt with her number scribbled at the bottom. That night, Alexander couldn't sleep. He replayed her laugh in his mind, the sparkle in her eyes when she spoke about wanting to own her own fashion label someday. She had depth. She wasn't just beautiful, she felt real. The next morning, a message came in. Hope you enjoyed the charcoal shirt. Good morning, stranger. He stared at his phone, smiling like a teenager. 2 weeks later, they went on their first date, And surprisingly, Lauren didn't choose a rooftop bar or a Mayfair restaurant. Instead, she took him to a hidden Ghanaian spot in Brixton. Rich men always eat in boring places, she teased, tucking into her spicy jollof. Let's just be normal today. Alexander loved that. It felt refreshing. Over the next few months, they became close. He sent her roses on her birthday. She surprised him with a hand-stitched pocket square. She texted every morning, "Good morning, my person." Slowly, his guarded heart began to open. He told her about his upbringing, about how his father passed away when he was 16, and how Madame Becky had raised him and his siblings alone. He spoke about the pressures of running a business, the loneliness of success, and his fear of falling for the wrong person. She listened. She encouraged. And when he finally said, "I think I'm falling for you," Lauren smiled and whispered, "I've been waiting for you to say that." She worked as a sales rep in the boutique and lived in a shared flat in Peckham. Her salary was modest, but Alexander didn't care. He admired her spirit. She was sharp, stylish, and proud of every inch of herself. One day she told him her dream, to start her own fashion brand. He promised to help, and he did. He gave her money to start a small online boutique, helped with logistics, even built her a free website. 6 months into the relationship, Alexander brought her up during a Sunday visit to his mother. Madame Becky raised her brows. "Who is this lady who has my son smiling like a choir boy?" "She's special," he said softly. "She's kind, driven, respectful. I think you'll like her." And when she finally met Lauren, she did like her, or at least wanted to. Lauren greeted with both hands, curtsied slightly, and even brought homemade plantain chips as a gift. She laughed politely at Alexander's sister's jokes and played peekaboo with his niece. Everyone said they were the perfect couple. Online, their pictures looked like something out of a magazine. Comments poured in, #couple goals. God, when? You two look like royalty. But beneath the surface, small things began to chip away at Alexander's peace. Lauren would sometimes joke, "You're lucky I'm dating you. Most girls would have demanded a G-Wagon by now." She'd comment on his posh Igbo accent in front of her friends and laugh when he mispronounced Yoruba words. Once, during a brunch with friends in Shoreditch, she whispered loudly, "Don't worry, babe. After we get married, I'll take over your wardrobe and sprinkle some sense into it." Alexander smiled then, but that moment stuck in his chest like a stone. One afternoon, he overheard her on a call with a friend. "Alexander is sweet, Shaw, but I can't wait till he opens a showroom for me in Chelsea. This online hustle is long." He shook it off. "Love makes you patient," he reminded himself. "She's just being playful." And so he pushed forward, planning their future, dreaming of their home, even sketching out the wedding date. The proposal? It was everything Lauren had dreamed of. On her birthday, he flew her to Edinburgh, took her to a candlelit rooftop restaurant, and proposed under the stars. She laughed. She cried. She screamed yes. Their photos went viral. She posted the ring with the caption, "My person, my peace, my yes. God did." And Alexander believed it. He believed it with all his heart. But little did he know, the closer the wedding day came, the further he was from the truth. After the engagement, things moved quickly. Lauren dove headfirst into wedding planning, Pinterest boards, dress fittings, florists, the whole 9 yards. She insisted on hiring a celebrity planner based in Chelsea. She wanted a wedding fit for royalty, as she put it. "Let's do it in central London," she said. "Somewhere classy, not Enfield or Brixton, please. Somewhere elevated." Alexander, ever accommodating, agreed. He booked St. Pancras Renaissance Hotel for the reception and reserved a church in South Kensington for the ceremony. He didn't flinch at the mounting costs. He wanted her to be happy. She picked a color scheme, champagne, ivory, and emerald. She wanted 5 outfit changes, a saxophonist from Instagram, a violinist for the aisle, 2 cakes, one designed in Igbo symbolism, the other Yoruba-inspired. Alexander nodded and signed every check. But there were moments, quiet moments, that gnawed at his gut. At a family lunch, Lauren barely acknowledged Madame Becky, When Alexander's aunt asked her to greet the elders traditionally, she gave a tight smile and sat down. Later that day, Alexander's cousin overheard Lauren telling her sister, "They're sweet, but I'm not built for all that ma and sir stuff. I'm a London girl, not a village bride." Still, he told himself it was nerves. "Weddings stress people out," he muttered as he drove home that night. Then came the culture clash. Lauren made it clear she didn't want any traditional Igbo customs at the reception. "Babe, no offense, but let's just keep the food light. I don't want people complaining about soup swimming in oil." "So, no ofe nsala? No egusi?" Alexander asked gently. "No, please. Just jollof, efo maybe some grilled sea bass. You know, modern, sophisticated." He nodded, but something inside him dimmed. Despite the tension, preparations soared ahead. Their pre-wedding shoot was done on a yacht in Canary Wharf. Their faces graced wedding blogs. Vendors praised them. Friends hyped them. But Madame Becky wasn't smiling anymore. She noticed things. Lauren's laughter never quite reached her eyes. She avoided eye contact with Alexander's family. She posed for selfies more than she asked how anyone was doing. One evening, Madame Becky found herself alone with her future daughter-in-law. "You don't seem excited," she said, brushing invisible lint off Lauren's shoulder. Lauren laughed lightly. "Oh, I'm just tired, Mummy. So much to plan. These vendors are draining my energy." Madame Becky smiled, but the answer didn't feel real. It felt rehearsed. Meanwhile, Alexander continued to drown in tasks. Seating charts, guest accommodations, vendor confirmations. He wanted things to be perfect. He had no time to question his heart. The night before the wedding, the entire hotel where both families were lodged bustled with life. Friends from abroad had flown in. Tailors made last-minute alterations. Makeup artists prepped kits. Phones rang non-stop. Alexander sat in the lounge with Femi, his best friend since secondary school. They reviewed the schedule one more time, making sure everything was ready. "You're too calm, bro," Femi teased. "You sure you're the groom?" Alexander smiled. "I've waited long enough for this. I just want to see her walk down that aisle." But upstairs, things were less composed. Lauren was in her bridal suite with her two closest friends, Tola and Bianca. They were sipping wine, lounging in silk robes, and laughing a little too loudly. Alexander arrived quietly with a tray of fruit and drinks. The door was slightly open. He paused outside and heard their conversation. "Babe, you've secured the jackpot," Tola giggled. "Honestly," Bianca added, "from boutique sales rep to Chelsea wife, I tap into this miracle." Lauren laughed. "Please, please. Let me just enjoy this money in peace. Girl, you're about to be married to a tech CEO. In 1 year, you'll be out of this rat race." Alexander froze. His heart did a strange flip. He wasn't sure if he should knock or just walk away. He finally cleared his throat, knocked gently, and stepped in. "Oh, my baby's here," Lauren squealed, rushing to hug him. The girls greeted him with sugary smiles. He smiled back, placed the tray on the table, kissed Lauren's forehead, and said nothing. On the outside, he looked calm. On the inside, he felt like something was cracking. Later that night, downstairs in the lobby, Femi handed him a stick of suya wrapped in foil. "Everything's set?" Alexander nodded slowly. "She looks tired, but she's okay. She should be happy. She's marrying the best man in the world." Alexander chuckled. "Trying to steal my title?" But deep down, the laughter didn't feel whole. He tried to sleep, but couldn't. His mind kept circling back to that one phrase. "Let me enjoy this money in peace." Still, he shook it off. Women say silly things sometimes. Don't ruin the moment. She loves you. That's what matters. At dawn, the church was already being decorated. White drapes cascaded over golden arches. Flowers lined the aisle, a string quartet rehearsed softly. Guests began arriving in glittering lace, fascinators, and tailored suits. Back at the hotel, Alexander made a quick trip to the restroom before leaving for the church. He chose to take the stairs rather than the lift. He needed the walk to steady himself. As he climbed past the bridal suite, laughter spilled out again. The door was ajar. He paused. Then he heard it, clearly. Please, please. After 1 year, I'm out. I'm not marrying this man for love. It was Lauren's voice. Dio has already started messaging me. I'll open a boutique with Alexander's money and bounce. Laughter followed, loud, careless, like they weren't even hiding. Igbo men are not for me. This one even talks like he grew up in a Nollywood script. Alexander stood frozen. His chest constricted. His mouth went dry. His pulse pounded in his ears. He staggered back, steadying himself against the wall. He didn't confront them. He just turned and walked, silently, purposefully, straight outside. Behind the flower truck near the church, Alexander stood still, gripping his phone with trembling hands. He called Femi. "Bro," he said in a hoarse whisper, "it's all fake." Femi's voice tightened. "What did you hear?" "She's marrying me for the money. She's still in love with her ex. She called my mom and family backward. It's all a plan." There was silence on the line. Then, "Stay there. I'm coming." Alexander ended the call and looked up at the sky. The morning sun lit the street in gold. But for him, everything had turned gray. The wedding was in just a few hours. But the truth had already arrived. By the time Femi reached the spot behind the flower truck, Alexander hadn't moved. He stood with his back to the church, hands clenched around his phone, eyes fixed on nothing. Femi didn't speak at first. He simply walked up beside him, placed a hand on his shoulder, and waited. After a long silence, Alexander muttered, "I wasn't even snooping. I just wanted to take the stairs." The door was open. Femi turned to face him. "What did you hear exactly?" Alexander looked at his friend, voice low but steady. "She said she's only marrying me for the money. That after a year, she's gone. She called my family backward. Said she still loves her ex, some guy named Dio." Femi's jaw tightened. "You're joking. I wish I was." There was another pause. "You helped her," Femi said, visibly angry now. "You paid her rent, built her website, bought her inventory, celebrated her culture. You even agreed to exclude Igbo food at your own wedding, just to please her." Alexander looked down at the pavement. "And now I'm the fool." "No," Femi said firm. "You're a good man. You're not a fool, but she's a liar, and she doesn't deserve you." Alexander wiped his face. "If I cancel the wedding now, she'll twist it. She'll cry to social media. People will think I abandoned her. Her family will protect her image. She'll walk away untouched. So what do you want to do?" Alexander took a deep breath. "I want the truth out, not for revenge, but for dignity. I want people to know who she really is, not who she pretends to be." Femi's eyes narrowed. "All right, we do this smart." 20 minutes later, Femi, dressed down in jeans and a t-shirt with a small camera strapped around his neck, walked back into the hotel. The bridal suite buzzed with excitement. Makeup brushes swept across cheeks. Edges were laid. Bouquets were fluffed. "Hey ladies," Femi greeted, holding up his phone. "I'm here for some quick behind-the-scenes footage. Just a little something for the wedding blog. Won't take more than 5 minutes." The girls, including Lauren, laughed and posed. "Mr. Videographer, people are waiting in church. Better be fast." "I promise," Femi said. "Let's do a fun segment." "Lauren, imagine it's 1 year after the wedding. You're rich, happy, running your boutique in Chelsea. Do a little skit." Lauren chuckled, picked up a wine glass, and raised it like a toast. "Cheers to soft life. I endured the accent, the family, the traditions. And now I'm free," Tola shouted. "No more bitter soup." "Exactly," Lauren added. "I can finally stop pretending to care about his backward customs. I'm not made for that. I'm a London babe, not a village wife." The girls cackled. Femi laughed too, but only on the surface. Unbeknownst to them, a small voice recorder hidden beneath a makeup bag was already capturing everything. As he left the room, Femi casually texted Alexander. "Got it, all of it." Back behind the hotel, Femi found Alexander pacing beside a line of delivery vans. "I have the footage," he said, handing over a small speaker. And the audio backup too. I left the recorder running even after I left the room. Alexander pressed play. For a moment, all that could be heard was laughter. Then Lauren's voice. I just need the papers to be clean. I'll act sweet for a while, get the shop, enjoy the money, then I'm gone. Dio is waiting. Alexander closed his eyes, jaw clenched, but didn't say a word. What now? Femi asked. I'll talk to my parents first. 10 minutes later, Madame Becky and Alexander's father stepped out from the side door of the church, confused. Why aren't you dressed yet? His mother asked, adjusting her elegant wrapper. Everyone is seated. They're playing the aisle music. I need to talk to you, Alexander said quietly. What's wrong? His father asked, scanning his face. I'm not getting married today. His mother froze. What? He played the recording. They listened, stunned, as Lauren's voice rang out, casually dismantling the entire relationship with her own words. By the end, Madame Becky's eyes were glistening with restrained pain. After everything, the way we welcomed her. Alexander's father didn't speak. He just clenched his fist, nostrils flaring. I'll go into that church myself and call it off, he said. But Madame Becky placed a hand on his arm. Wait, she said quietly. Let her be exposed the way she planned to disgrace our son. Let everyone hear the truth. Alexander's lips trembled. Mom? She met his eyes firmly. You are not weak. Don't run from this moment. Walk into that room like a man. Let her fall on her own sword. His father nodded slowly. Whatever you decide, we're with you. Alexander breathed deeply, looked up at the sky and whispered, Thank you. Then he squared his shoulders. Inside the church, the music was soft and serene. The room glowed with gold candles and ivory roses. Guests smiled at one another, cameras poised. A wedding planner whispered instructions to the choir. The groom was about to be announced. But he was already standing at the altar, alone. Then the doors opened. Lauren Jackson appeared in her glittering white gown, makeup flawless, bouquet trembling slightly in her hands. Gasps echoed through the pews. She glided down the aisle like a princess. When she reached the altar, she took Alexander's hand and whispered, Why so stiff, babe? We're on camera. Alexander didn't answer. He faced the pastor. Today is a celebration of love, the pastor began, a journey of two souls becoming one. Excuse me, Alexander said, calmly but clearly. The room fell silent. The pastor blinked. Yes? Alexander stepped forward, placed the small speaker on the pulpit, and pressed play. Laughter. Then, let me enjoy this money first. After a year, I'll be done. I'm not here for love, just the bag. Gasps. A woman dropped her hand fan. Someone in the second row covered her mouth. The whispers began immediately. Lauren turned pale. Alexander, what is this? He didn't answer. He turned to the congregation. This was supposed to be the start of something honest. But it wasn't honest. It was a show. I loved her. I honored her family. I gave her everything. And this is what I got. Lauren lunged forward, grabbing his arm. It was a joke. Baby, I was just joking with my girls. Alexander stepped back. He pulled the marriage certificate from his jacket, tore it in half, and dropped the pieces on the floor. I won't be made a fool in front of God, my family, or myself. Then he walked down the aisle. Guests moved aside. His parents followed him silently. Femi was behind them, recording nothing now, just watching his friend walk out of a lie and into the truth. No one cheered. No one clapped. The silence in the church was deafening. At the altar, Lauren stood alone, still clutching her bouquet, her world collapsing around her. Lauren Jackson stood at the altar, paralyzed. Her hands shook. Her makeup began to melt beneath the heat of the chandeliers and the heavy silence of hundreds of eyes watching her. No one moved. No one said a word. Her bouquet slipped from her fingers and hit the floor with a soft thud. She turned toward the guests in disbelief, searching for a friendly face, but none offered comfort. Not even her bridesmaids Tola and Bianca, who had laughed with her just hours ago. They slowly stepped back, heads down, moving toward the side aisle like they didn't even know her. Her parents sat stunned in the front pew. Her mother stared ahead, lips parted, humiliated. Her father, Chief Jackson, slowly removed his glasses, cleaned them with a shaking hand, and then, without looking at her, stood and walked out of the church. The whispers grew louder. She planned it? She said that about his family? Igbo people? How could she? Was it ever real? Phones began buzzing. Someone had already uploaded the audio online. The hashtags were starting. #runaway groom, #dignity. Overdrama, #not my bride. Lauren felt her knees weaken. She turned again, hoping Alexander would come back, but the church doors remained closed. The man she mocked, the man she planned to use and discard, had walked away without a single insult, without raising his voice, without even glancing back. Outside, Alexander Drake sat quietly in the back seat of his cousin's car. Madame Becky was beside him, holding his hand gently. His father sat in front, arms crossed, seething in silence. Femi sat next to him, still watching him closely. They said nothing on the drive to Kem's flat in Hampstead. Behind them, a few cars followed, relatives who had left the wedding in quiet support. When they arrived, Kem opened the door with tears in her eyes. "Come in, Alex," she said softly. "This is your home now." Alexander walked inside, still in his suit, looking like a man who had attended his own funeral, but had risen again stronger. His aunt brought him a glass of water. His cousin handed him a warm blanket. His uncle said only, "You did the right thing." Later that evening, his father finally spoke. "You didn't yell. You didn't curse. You simply showed them the truth. You're my son. And I'm proud of you." Alexander nodded slowly. "I feel empty." Madame Becky placed her palm on his back. "That emptiness will pass. You chose peace over shame, and I thank God for it." Femi leaned forward. "You didn't just protect your name, bro. You taught every young man out there that dignity is priceless. You walked away with your head high." Alexander said nothing. He just exhaled, for the first time that day. Meanwhile, Lauren's life unraveled like a cheap ribbon. Back in her hotel room, still wearing her wedding gown, she sat on the edge of the bed, her makeup streaked with tears. The white satin dress was wrinkled, soiled, and clung awkwardly to her, like a costume she no longer deserved. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Comments flooded her Instagram. "You mocked his culture? From boutique girl to disaster. You called his mom backward? You don't deserve him. Shame." She tried to call Bianca, switched off. She texted Tola, no reply. She messaged Femi, blocked. Even her makeup artist deleted every tagged photo from her page. The florist posted a photo of Alexander walking out with the caption, "Dignity will always be more fashionable than drama." Her parents refused to speak. Her mother sobbed silently at home. Her father sat in the living room, ignoring her completely. That same day, Drake's Tech withdrew a pending business proposal that was meant to be a lifeline for her father's struggling logistics firm. The email came in cold and clinical. "Due to internal restructuring and reputational concerns, we will not be moving forward." That one deal was supposed to change the Jackson family's fortune. Now it was gone. Chief Jackson didn't scream. He didn't yell. He simply switched off his phone and stared out the window like a man who had lost a legacy. Lauren sat in her childhood bedroom that night, staring at her reflection. For the first time in her life, she truly felt poor. Not in money, but in value. She had lost the one man who saw her as more than just a pretty face. She had thrown away love, respect, and peace. For Instagram dreams, for fake friendships, for a soft life that now looked like dust. She opened Alexander's number. Blocked. She checked WhatsApp. His profile photo. Gone. Instagram. Nothing. It was like she had never existed in his world. That silence hurt more than any public backlash. He hadn't cursed her. He hadn't posted a single statement. He simply erased her. And somehow that made her feel more exposed than anything else. Back at Kem's flat, Alexander sat by the window, sipping the tea his mother had made. He scrolled through his messages. Friends, old classmates, even strangers. You handled it like a king. No noise, just truth. Thank you for showing us that peace is louder than chaos. Still, he wasn't celebrating. He wasn't dancing. He was just breathing, finally free. Femi sat nearby, watching him with quiet concern. You all right? Alexander nodded. I will be. And he meant it. 6 months had passed since the wedding that never was. The internet had moved on to new scandals. The blogs had stopped reposting the video. The hashtags faded. The name Lauren Jackson no longer trended. Life in London moved as it always did, fast, loud, and forgetful. But in one quiet corner of the city, Alexander Drakes was slowly rebuilding his world. He had taken time off, not just from the public eye, but from everything, from boardrooms, from interviews, from curated photos and spotless suits. He handed over day-to-day operations of Drake's Tech to his trusted COO and told his assistant, no press, no meetings, no calls, unless it's family. He didn't return to his penthouse in Knightsbridge. Instead, he rented a modest, sunlit flat at the edge of Richmond, near the riverside, tucked away behind an old bookstore and a flower shop. It wasn't flashy, but it was peaceful, and that's all he craved now. Every morning, he jogged through the nearby trail, past swans gliding on the Thames. Every afternoon, he read by the window or volunteered quietly at a youth coding center in the borough, helping underprivileged teens learn HTML, Python, and design thinking. That was where he met Amira Bello. She wasn't loud, she wasn't glamorous, she didn't flirt or flatter. She was simply there, on time in simple clothes, with a pen tucked behind her ear and kindness tucked into every word she spoke. She taught creative writing to the same kids Alexander mentored. They crossed paths once, twice, then often. Hi, you're the tech guy, she said the first time. He chuckled. That's what they call me now? Well, it beats the maths ghost, which is what they call the man who disappeared during coding class last term. He laughed, really laughed. Her humor was dry, her tone soft, and her confidence effortless. Over the next few weeks, their conversations stretched from 5 minutes to 15, from greetings to shared jokes, from tech to books, from books to life. She never once asked what car he drove, never Googled him, never once mentioned the viral wedding scandal. In fact, she didn't even seem to know. And he didn't volunteer the story either. Not yet. One Saturday evening, they sat together on a bench behind the youth center. The wind was cool, the sky painted in fading gold. Amira unwrapped roasted corn and ground nuts and offered him some. You don't talk much about yourself, she said gently. I've talked enough in the past. These days, I prefer listening. She nodded slowly. Wise. He looked at her, the way her hair coiled naturally, the way she wiped her hands on her denim skirt without worry, the way she smiled without needing to be seen. For the first time in months, he didn't feel like a man recovering. He felt like a man beginning. Later that week, Alexander visited his parents in Notting Hill. Madame Becky opened the door, eyes lighting up at the sight of him. My son, she said, pulling him into a warm hug, you look like you finally slept. He smiled. I think I have. Over dinner, they talked about work, his siblings, politics, and finally, love. I met someone, he said softly. His father's spoon paused midair. She's a volunteer, not in tech, not flashy, but kind and real. His mother leaned forward. What's her name? Amira. A pause. She's Yoruba, he added, reading the room. Another pause. Then, slowly, his father lowered his spoon and said, Are you sure, Alex? Alexander nodded. Yes. But after what happened? I can't punish an entire tribe for one person's mistake. That's not how you raised me. Madame Becky smiled faintly. You're right. We just want you to be happy and respected. His father added, and seen. I am, Alexander said firmly, for the first time in a long time. Meanwhile, Lauren Jackson was living in shadows. Her boutique had closed 2 months after the failed wedding. Her online sales tanked. Customers stopped buying. Vendors stopped supplying. She couldn't walk into a salon without people whispering. Couldn't walk into church without judgment. Couldn't scroll through her socials without someone reposting the audio. Her parents' business deal with Drake's Tech was gone. Her father was still reeling from the financial blow. His friends stopped calling. His business line went quiet. The Chelsea wife life she had once dreamt of, it now felt like a cruel echo. Her phone contacts dwindled. Tola and Bianca blocked her after the backlash reached them too. No apology could undo the shame. No excuse could unspill the tea. And worst of all, Alexander never responded. She sent emails. Long ones. She sent voice notes. Desperate ones. She tried calling from different numbers. All were ignored. He didn't need revenge. He didn't need to drag her name. He didn't even report her. He just vanished from her world. Quietly, completely. And that silence became the loudest punishment of all. Back in Richmond, Alexander sat across from Amira at a quiet cafe. She read a poem aloud from her notebook. He listened, fingers wrapped around a warm cup of Earl Grey. When she finished, he said nothing for a moment. Then, that line, about love not needing to scream to be heard, that stuck. She looked up. I meant it. So do I. The gray of winter slowly peeled away, and London began to blush with spring. Trees along the Thames swayed with new life. Flower stalls returned to street corners. The cold that had gripped the city for months began to soften. And so did Alexander Drake's. It had been 7 months since he walked out of that church. 7 months since he tore the wedding contract at the altar. 7 months since he played that recording for the world to hear, but he didn't dwell on it anymore. He had nothing more to say. There were no interviews, no public statements, no articles, only silence. And in that silence, he healed. He no longer saw himself as a man who was betrayed. He no longer felt like the groom that never wed. He had become something else, calmer, lighter, free. His life no longer orbited around curated perfection, no more staged photos or fancy dinners. These days, his joy was simpler, teaching coding to kids who had never seen a laptop before, laughing with his niece as she spilled cereal on his shirt, sharing quiet walks with Amira Bello, the woman who had become the most unexpected piece in his life. They didn't rush into anything. There were no declarations, no grand gestures. They just grew. One day, while sorting old books at the youth center, Alexander asked, "Have you ever had your heart broken?" Amira glanced at him. "Once, long ago. Why?" He shrugged, just wondering if the heart grows stronger or just wiser. She thought for a moment. Maybe both. Maybe wiser first, then stronger after. He nodded. That sounds right. One weekend, Amira invited him to her family home in Lewisham. It was her father's birthday, a soft-spoken man who used to be a train conductor. Alexander wore a simple blue shirt, brought wine, and helped carry folding chairs to the garden. He met her mother, a retired teacher with a strict bun and a kind heart. He helped pass suya trays. He didn't try to impress. He just was. And Amira's parents liked that. Later that evening, as they sat on the porch listening to old Fela Kuti songs, her mother leaned over and said, "He listens. That's rare." Amira smiled. "I know." Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Lauren Jackson could barely step into the Tesco on her street without sensing stares. She kept her head down these days, her Instagram on private, her comments disabled. She had taken a job as a stylist assistant, far from the Chelsea dream she had once bragged about, far from the designer shop she once hoped would bear her name. People still whispered when they recognized her. Some called her that girl from the audio. Others were kinder, but most just stared. She tried to date again. Once, a man she met on a Christian dating app, but it didn't last. She couldn't fake the energy anymore, couldn't perform the softness she never truly had. Every relationship felt like a shadow. None could match the man she had mocked, then lost. One night, alone in her flat, she opened the old messages again. She stared at the ones she sent to Alexander, the ones he never read. The messages where she said, "Please, I'm sorry. Let me explain." Then she deleted them, all of them, because deep down she knew he was never going to answer. One morning, Alexander stood at the cafe near the coding center, stirring sugar into his coffee. The barista handed him a napkin. On it, in neat handwriting, was a message. "Silence isn't weakness. Sometimes it's survival." He turned to see Amira holding a cup of hibiscus tea, smiling lightly. He smiled back. "Did you write that?" "I read it. Thought you'd like it." "I do," he said, then paused. "That was me. That's how I survived." She nodded, sipping her tea. "I know." A few days later, he brought her to meet his mother. Madame Becky opened the door in her signature wrapper and pearls, her eyes narrowing with curiosity and hope. "You must be Amira," she said. "Yes, ma'am. It's lovely to meet you." They spoke for hours over pepper soup and lemonade. Madame Becky observed everything. The way Amira leaned forward when someone else was talking, the way she reached for dishes with both hands, the way she smiled without forcing it. When Amira got up to help clear the plates, Madame Becky gave her son a look that said, "This one is different." Later that night, as they walked back to the car, Alexander whispered, "She likes you." Amira raised an eyebrow. "Was she testing me?" "Definitely." "And?" "She already asked when you're coming back." Amira laughed softly, her hand brushing his. "I like her too." There was still no proposal, no announcement, no pressure. But there was peace. And that Alexander knew now was more romantic than any spotlight. The days blurred softly into weeks, then into months. London's spring bloomed into summer, and Alexander Drakes found himself enjoying life in a way he hadn't before. Not just surviving, but living. He no longer thought about the wedding that never was. It didn't hurt anymore. Not because he forgot, but because he had finally forgiven himself. He had forgiven himself for falling in love with someone who didn't value him, for ignoring the signs, for mistaking charm for character, for letting himself believe that kindness would be enough to change someone's heart. He had learned something no Ivy League business school could teach. Peace is priceless, and silence is strength. On a quiet Sunday afternoon, Amira came over to his flat in Richmond with a small box wrapped in brown paper. "What's this?" he asked as she handed it to him. "Open it." Inside was a journal, handbound. The pages smelled of fresh leather and subtle lavender. The first page had an inscription in neat, slanted writing. "To the man who taught me loudest dignity comes from quiet decisions. May this space be where you keep only what is true." Alexander looked at her, stunned for a moment. Then his eyes softened. "I've never received a gift like this." "I know," Amira replied, leaning on the kitchen counter. "You deserve more of what you've never received." He set the journal down and walked toward her, folding her gently into his arms. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" "For not needing me to be anything but myself." Later that week, while sitting on a bench in Kew Gardens, Amira asked, "Do you think you'll ever get married?" Alexander turned to her slowly. "I still believe in marriage. I just don't believe in performance anymore. I want something rooted, something unreal." She nodded. "I understand." He took her hand and said, "No pressure, but if I ever do propose again, it won't be for the camera or the crowd or the applause. It'll be because in my spirit I know it's right." Amira smiled. "Then I hope I'm there when that day comes." "You already are," he said, voice low but full of meaning. Meanwhile, in a cramped flat in Deptford, Lauren Jackson finally moved out of her parents' house. Not by choice, but because Chief Jackson had sold the property to cover debts. Their family business never recovered. Clients disappeared. Contracts were canceled. Her father's health declined. Her mother aged twice as fast. They never said it out loud, but Lauren knew she was the cause. The deal with Drake's Tech was gone. The respect of their community? Gone. Their financial future? Gone. All for a lie that she wore like perfume, until it stained everything. Lauren still scrolled through Instagram at night, still paused when she saw a quote about dignity or heartbreak, still searched his name, even though she knew his account was now private. She thought about messaging him again, but she didn't, because deep down she knew what he had given her. Not revenge, not embarrassment, not slander, just truth. And the world had heard it. One morning, Alexander opened the new journal and wrote, "I used to believe love had to be loud. The grand gestures and trending hashtags made it real. But now I understand. Love whispers. It doesn't boast. It doesn't demand. It simply shows up quietly and stays. And when it stays, you don't need to question it. You just know." That evening, Amira stood by the window in his flat, watching the sunset bleed across the London skyline. He walked up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. "You're quiet," he said. "I'm thinking." "About?" She turned, resting her forehead gently against his. "About how lucky I am that someone else's betrayal led you to me." He smiled. "It didn't feel lucky at the time." "I know." They stood in silence. Then she whispered, "What would you call what we have?" He didn't speak right away. Instead, he held her hand, led her to the couch, and sat down with her. Then he said, "I'd call it the softest kind of home." By late summer, Alexander Drakes had fully embraced a rhythm of life that didn't revolve around headlines, power suits, or corporate handshakes. He still ran Drake's Tech, but from a quieter distance, choosing strategy over spotlights. He showed up when needed, but otherwise delegated and focused on being present in his own life. His heart no longer felt like a fortress. It felt more like a garden, rebuilt, nurtured, blooming again. And Amira Bello had become its most consistent sunlight. On a Wednesday afternoon, while helping a group of kids install refurbished desktop computers at the youth center, one of the boys, Jalen, about 12 years old, tugged at Alexander's sleeve. "Sir, are you married?" Alexander paused mid-screwdriver turn, chuckling. "No, not yet." "Why not? You seem like you'd be a good husband." Femi, who happened to be visiting that day and overheard the question, burst into laughter. Alexander looked at Jalen, then smiled thoughtfully. "Because I wanted to make sure I understood what love really meant before I tried again." "Didn't you already understand it?" "Not then," Alexander said softly. "But I do now." Femi raised his brows. "Do you really?" Alexander didn't answer. He didn't need to. Later that evening, he took a walk through Primrose Hill with Amira. The air smelled like lilacs and freshly cut grass. The sky was painted with pink and tangerine streaks, London's skyline glowing in the distance. They walked hand in hand, stopping occasionally to admire the view. "Do you ever think about the day we met?" Amira asked. "All the time. I wasn't even supposed to be at the youth center that week. I was covering for someone. And I wasn't supposed to come either. I was avoiding board meetings." She laughed. "So destiny then?" He stopped walking. "No," he said gently. "I call it mercy." She turned to him confused. "I was on the brink of losing myself. That wedding, what happened? It broke something inside me, but then you appeared, not to save me, but to show me I still had something worth giving. That love didn't have to perform. That peace is love's most honest proof." Her eyes glistened. She touched his cheek lightly. "You're healing beautifully, you know?" "I'm not healing anymore," he whispered. "I'm whole." That same week, Madame Becky called Alexander for a Sunday lunch. "Just come, no reason," she said casually. But when he arrived, the table was set with jollof rice, grilled plantain, tilapia, and a warm apple pie, Amira's favorite. Amira was already there, seated beside his father, deep in conversation about a documentary on Yoruba folklore. His mother winked as she handed him a plate. "You brought her, but we're keeping her," she said with a grin. Alexander smiled. He watched as Amira laughed with his little cousin, helped serve water, and nodded respectfully to his uncle. There was no show, no pressure, just a woman who belonged without trying. Later that night, Alexander walked her home. They stood at her door under a street lamp flickering softly. She looked at him. "I've never felt this steady before." He nodded. "You make me steady." She took his hand and kissed his knuckles. "You know I don't need a ring to feel loved." He leaned in, forehead touching hers. "But I'd still like to give you one." A pause. "I want to try again, Amira, but this time, no crowd, no hashtags, no performance. Just you and me, and maybe a small garden where we can say yes in whispers." Her smile grew slowly. "Is this a proposal?" "No," he said. "This is a promise." Meanwhile, Lauren Jackson sat alone on the rooftop of her apartment building, scrolling through her phone. She stumbled upon a post from the youth center in Richmond, a photo of Alexander surrounded by laughing children, a caption beneath it that read, "Thank you to our volunteer mentor, Alexander Drakes. The kids don't just learn tech, they learn humility." There were no flashy suits, no expensive cars, just a man in jeans and a t-shirt, kneeling beside a child with a motherboard in hand. Lauren stared at the photo. For the first time in months, she cried, not out of anger, not out of bitterness, but because she finally saw the man she had lost, not in marble floors or social clout, but in truth. And she knew deep down, he would never come back. By the time autumn leaves began to drift through the London streets like scattered gold, Alexander Drakes had already made a quiet decision, one not announced with fanfare, nor marked with hashtags, but grounded in peace. He was going to marry Amira Bello, but not in the way the world expected. There would be no castle venue, no six-tier cake, no luxury SUV convoy, no branded napkins or matching ASO Ebby. Just two people in love, in rhythm, with nothing to prove to anyone. They sat on a park bench one breezy Saturday morning, watching a young couple take wedding photos nearby. The bride laughed as her veil blew away in the wind, and the groom chased it playfully. Amira leaned her head on Alexander's shoulder. "Remember when weddings used to mean something simple? Two people, one promise, that's all. I think we're bringing that back," he replied. She looked up. "Are you ready?" Alexander nodded. "With you, yes." She smiled. "Then let's do it our way." Their ceremony was held on a Sunday afternoon in a small botanical garden in Battersea. Just 30 people, close family, a few friends, no influencers, no photographers from tabloids. The only camera in sight was Femi's, discreetly capturing moments like falling leaves and stolen glances. Amira wore a flowing cream silk dress with tiny embroidered leaves along the hem. Her hair was wrapped in a soft updo, and her makeup was nearly invisible. She walked barefoot down the grassy aisle to the sound of a single cello. Alexander stood under an arch of eucalyptus and lavender, wearing a charcoal suit and a quiet smile. No shaking hands, no last-minute nerves. Just certainty. Madame Becky wept silently through the vows, clutching a white handkerchief, while Alexander's father nodded in approval, arms folded like a sentinel of legacy. Femi stood beside his friend as best man. No speeches, just presence. And when Alexander took Amira's hand and whispered, "I promise to choose peace with you every day," the garden seemed to breathe with them. There was no applause, only stillness. The kind that comes when truth finally settles into the soul. After the ceremony, they shared a picnic-style meal on the grass, roasted chicken, plantain, couscous, sweet wine, and chin-chin. No wedding DJ, just a curated playlist of old Nigerian highlife and soft soul classics. People danced barefoot under the trees, laughing like children. There were no gifts, only handwritten letters from guests, sealed with love and humility. One letter read, "You've shown us that dignity doesn't wear diamonds. It wears honesty." Another, "Thank you for reminding us that love isn't loud, it's present." Later that night, as the garden emptied and twilight crept across the sky, Alexander and Amira sat quietly under the archway where they had just exchanged vows. "Do you think people expected something different?" Amira asked. "Probably. Do you care?" He looked at her, eyes soft with certainty. "Not even a little." She took off her shoes and rested her head on his lap. He ran his fingers gently through her hair, breathing in the scent of lavender and freedom. "You know," he said, "I think I was always meant to love like this." She closed her eyes. "Me too." Meanwhile, in a dimly lit apartment in South London, Lauren Jackson scrolled past a single photo that made her fingers tremble. A picture posted by Femi, Amira, barefoot, walking hand in hand with Alexander through a field of autumn leaves. No tags, no faces, just serenity. The caption read, "Some stories don't trend, but they last." She stared at it for a long time. And for the first time in her life, she didn't feel rage. She didn't feel jealousy. She felt something she couldn't explain. A quiet ache, the kind that comes from understanding something too late. She closed the app and sat still in the silence of her room. There was no one to perform for anymore. Only herself. Back in Richmond, Alexander placed a fresh page into his journal and wrote, "This isn't revenge. This isn't victory. This is redemption. Not of image, but of soul. I didn't find love again. I found peace. And in that peace, love found me. No applause, no stage. Just one vow whispered in a garden, and a life finally beginning." Married life didn't change Alexander Drake's overnight. It didn't come with fanfare, and it didn't feel like a dramatic shift. It was gentle, like a curtain opening, slowly to morning light. He and Amira Drakes didn't travel to the Maldives. They didn't post beach photos or his and hers passports. Instead, they spent their honeymoon in the Cotswolds, in a rented cottage with a wood-burning stove, thick woolen blankets, and a garden of wild rosemary. They cooked together, took long walks, read beside each other in silence, laughed over burnt toast, danced to old-school Afro jazz on a crackling speaker. It wasn't grand, but it was theirs. When they returned to London, Alexander didn't throw himself back into work immediately. He continued his volunteer sessions at the youth center, now side by side with Amira, who had added a storytelling hour for younger kids. "You two work like you've always been a team," the center director once said, watching them teach a class together. Alexander only smiled. "Because we are." At home, they built slow habits. Mondays were for silent reading and tea. Thursdays were for trying new soup recipes. Sundays were for family, his mother, her parents, small conversations over pounded yam, and laughter that echoed down the hallway. There was no pressure to be perfect, no performance, just partnership. They shared chores, shared fears, shared their pasts in pieces, tenderly like old china, too delicate to hold all at once. One night, while folding laundry, Amira paused and asked softly, "Do you ever think about her?" She didn't say the name. She didn't need to. Alexander placed a pair of socks into a drawer and turned. "Not the way I used to," he said. "Not with anger." She nodded. "That's healthy." He took her hand. "What happened with her? Taught me who I never want to be and who I truly am." "Who are you?" she asked gently. He looked at her. "A man who now understands that love isn't about proving anything. It's about peace and choosing it every day." She kissed his hand. "Then I'm glad you chose me." Across town, Lauren Jackson had taken a new job at a retail warehouse. It wasn't what she imagined for herself, but it paid her rent and gave her structure. She now took the bus, packed her lunch, avoided social media. Her phone was quieter, her weekends lonelier. But for the first time in years, she was learning who she was when no one was watching. Her therapist, someone she had started seeing after the fallout, once said, "Growth feels like grief at first. You mourn the ego before you meet your true self." Lauren wrote that on a sticky note and taped it to her bathroom mirror. Some days, she looked at it and nodded. Other days, she cried. But the difference now? She stayed. She stayed with herself through the shame, the discomfort, the quiet. One Sunday, while walking through Greenwich Park, she saw a couple laughing on a picnic blanket. The man looked vaguely like Alexander. Tall, clean-shaven, thoughtful. But it wasn't him. And she didn't wish it was. She kept walking. Back in Richmond, Alexander added a new entry to his journal. Peace is not the absence of people. It is the presence of self. I don't need the world to clap when I get it right. I just need to know I didn't betray who I am in the process. Later that evening, Amira came home with a box of books for the center. One fell open on the coffee table, its pages flipping gently in the breeze. She paused, smiled, then called out to him. Alex? Yes? Come see this. He walked over and looked down. It was a children's book, one she planned to read to the kids. The line that had caught her attention? Sometimes the best stories don't start with once upon a time. Sometimes they start with, I almost gave up, but then I didn't. They both smiled, because that, without question, was their story. A year later, Drake's Tech celebrated its 10th anniversary. The event was small, deliberately so. No red carpet, no influencer list, just staff, partners, a few mentees from the youth center, and family. The celebration took place in a refurbished co-working space in Shoreditch, filled with string lights, beanbags, food trucks, and soft music. Alexander Drake stood near the back wall, sipping Chapman from a paper cup, while watching a young intern confidently explain an app he'd built to an investor. He didn't wear a suit, no speech, no champagne toast. Just quiet pride. Beside him, Amira leaned into his shoulder. You've changed so many lives, you know. He glanced at her. So have you. They exchanged a smile that didn't need words. Because some connections don't show off. They settle. They root. They remain. At one point during the evening, Femi dragged him aside. I still remember that day, he said. You standing behind the church, heart torn in half, wondering whether to walk in or disappear. Alexander gave a quiet chuckle. And you said, let's teach this girl a lesson for shaming Yoruba babes. They both laughed. Do you regret how you handled it? Femi asked, more serious now. Alexander thought for a moment, then shook his head. No, I needed to hear the truth. And I needed to walk away, not just from her, but from the version of myself who tolerated less than I deserved. Femi clapped his back. And look where that got you. Alexander looked toward Amira, now helping a teenage girl balance a plate of jollof and grilled chicken without spilling it. I know. I see her every morning. Across the city, in a small shared flat in Catford, Lauren Jackson stood before a mirror fastening a modest name tag to her cardigan. Assistant floor manager, Habitat Home Goods. Not where she imagined she'd be at 30. But still, she was trying. She had enrolled in a part-time business class, started volunteering once a month at a women's shelter, deleted her old Instagram permanently. Her therapist asked recently, if you could say one thing to him now, not to win him back, but just to honor the truth, what would it be? She had thought long and hard, and finally replied, thank you for walking away before I destroyed more than your heart. That night, she opened a blank notebook and began writing, tentatively, nervously, a memoir. Title, The Girl Who Watched a Good Man Leave. Back in Richmond, Alexander returned home after the anniversary party and found Amira already in bed, hair wrapped, glasses perched on her nose, as she highlighted a page from a book on African mythology. He leaned in the doorway and watched her for a moment, smiling. Still working? Just reading. He sat beside her, pulled her feet onto his lap, and kissed her ankle. Do you think we've become boring? She looked up with mock offense. Excuse me? No scandal, no paparazzi, no drama, just us. She laughed, put the book down, and took his hand. I think boring is deeply underrated. They turned off the lights, the hum of the city beyond the windows fading as they curled into each other. Some love stories end in fireworks, others in silence. But the best ones? They begin again, after the pain, after the noise, after the lesson. In gardens, on quiet streets, on soft bed sheets scented with trust. On their second anniversary, Alexander and Amira sat at the edge of the Thames, eating puff-puff from a paper bag. A little girl in pink roller skates sped past them and waved. They waved back. Amira turned to him and whispered, "Would you ever want one?" "A puff." She rolled her eyes. "A daughter." Alexander looked at her, his hand sliding over her belly gently. "I already do." She laughed, tears gathering at the edges of her eyes. And in that moment, everything that had once broken him suddenly made sense. Because sometimes the heartbreak is not the end, it's just the flame that clears the path. Dear viewers, what lesson did you take away from this dramatic tale? We would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below.